Our Canadian Grand Prix F1 driver ratings. Right, let's get into the driver ratings then and start with Kevin Magnussen. I'm going to give Kevin Magnussen a healthy 7 out of 10. I feel as though he was a bit screwed over by his team after producing a lovely, beautiful start on the wet tyres. We thought Kevin Magnussen was going to be champion of the world at that specific moment in time. He was flying through, making moves, and it was a decent enough drive. I don't really know how he'd ended up 12th. I think it's mainly just because they weren't able to take full advantage of the amazing start that Magnussen had by not having the tyres ready. So I think he had like an 8.5 second pit stop, which then puts him back in the pack a little bit. Otherwise, I think maybe, just maybe, he could have scored a point. But still, K-Mag, you drove well, so you get a 7.
I have also gone for a 7 out of 10 for Kevin Magnussen. He did a impressive qualifying, has to be said, beating Nico Hulkenberg, which we've not seen a lot. And then in a race where a lot of people are spinning off, making mistakes, crashing, he was very un-Kevin Magnussen and had a really, really good race. And it was great to watch him at the start go through the field. Such a shame that the pit stop happened, because if they'd have done, even a 3-second pit stop, he's gaining a lot of time, positions, and then it was so hard to overtake through a lot of the race, and we saw a lot of trains in the midfield that maybe points could have been achieved, but sadly not for K-Mag.
The fans gave K-Mag a 6. Nico Hulkenberg qualified 19th, started 17th, finished 11th.
I'm going to go for a 6 for Hulkenberg because I think it's a missed opportunity for Nico Hulkenberg, and I think it's all come undone in qualifying, because we know how good Nico Hulkenberg is in qualifying, and in a race like that, disappointing to start so low down, because if he'd have put in another one of his great quali performances and also had that wet tyre gamble, he'd have easily been in the points, and who knows where it'd have been.
I'm going to go for a 7, mainly because I'm feeling quite generous for the drivers that decided not to bin it in a very difficult changeable condition race. Also, Nico Hulkenberg, I believe, was used as a bit of a device to slow down all of those cars behind when he was left kind of to sit out there on his own on the wet tyres. So I've got to respect the team play there as well, and of course he beat his teammates. So for me, it's a solid drive from Nico, just missing out on points, so it's a 7. And the fans gave him a 6. Zhou Guanyu qualified 20th, started from the pit lane, finished 15th. I am giving Zhou Guanyu a 2 out of 10. You might think, oh, Matt, qualified 20th, finished 15th in a state. That's amazing. He was the last of the finishers. It is probably the worst season out of all the drivers, and it's kind of going under the radar because he's driving in a dustbin. But it, anonymous race this, anonymous race that. We've just had a ridiculously mental race, and Zhou is still finishing last. It's really poor. Like, this is the only opportunity for the state car to get anywhere near the rest of the field, but again, last place.
Yeah, I've gone for a 3 out of 10 for Zhou Guanyu. Zhou is just consistently at the back, and he's not even at the back at the moment. He seems to have this gap where things like Q1 is incredibly close, and then we have another half a second, and then Zhou's there, or sometimes even a second. He's on incredibly poor form, and he's not going to have any hope of a seat next year if it carries on. In fact, I think he's just too far gone now. No one's going to consider him, I don't think.
I agree as well. I think that it's a done deal, unfortunately, for Zhou. The fans gave him a 2 as well. Valtteri Bottas qualified 17th, started from the pit lane as well, and finished 13th.
I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Valtteri Bottas. Anonymous, standard race in a kick Sauber, but he kept it on the road. A lot better than his teammate. That car is terrible, but at least Bottas has shown something from it, but it's nothing to kind of really shout about.
No, I've also gone for a 5 out of 10 for Valtteri. At least he beat Tsunoda after the small bottle that happened. He's off the back of the rest of the pack of the Hasses and whatnot, but it's nothing. You can't really slander him too much. I think he's sort of done okay. So that's why I've gone for a 5 out of 10. And the fans gave him a 5 as well. Yuki Tsunoda qualified 8th, started 8th, finished 14th. A 4 out of 10 for Yuki Tsunoda. I'm not going to give him a 2 or a 3. I know his small mistake undid his race, but I am giving him a slight bit of lenience, and also taking into account that he did incredible the entire rest of the weekend. So yeah, he's going to get away with a 4 from me, but such a shame.
It is sad times. I've gone for a 4 as well. Absolutely gutting for Yuki Tsunoda, because you look back and he maybe should have been boring and just settled for position. I know it was just one of those moments at that corner. We saw a few people run wide there as soon as you get off the line. He was doing everything he could to try and pass. I think it was Ocon who was stuck behind. It was in a bit of a train, and then it cost him big time. So big shame for Yuki.
It was a big shame. The fans gave Yuki Tsunoda a 5. Daniel Ricciardo qualified 5th, started 5th, finished 8th.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Daniel Ricciardo. It was a very bizarre race for Daniel Ricciardo, because he obviously qualified amazingly well, then had this jump start, and it looked like he'd completely thrown any chance of points away, and we were going to be having the conversation of Yuki's scored a load of points and Danny's got nothing again. Like, how's it come unravelled when he had that great quali? But then he kept it on the road and delivered a good points finish, which is exactly what RB needs. So yeah, it was a good performance from Daniel. Maybe he needs to get slandered by Jack Villeneuve every weekend to give him a little boost.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 as well for Daniel Ricciardo. I think it was a really solid weekend for Daniel. Of course, qualifying 5th place is one way to shut up your critics. He needs to continue doing this and continue scoring points, and we can't just have one-offs like Mexico and things like that. But a very promising race and weekend for Daniel Ricciardo, so I'm very happy for him. The fans also gave him an 8 out of 10. Logan Sargent qualified 13th, started 13th, didn't finish. It's going to be a 1 out of 10. He earned that 1 point by getting into Q2. Congratulations. You're not getting a 0. But after that, just you wowzers. Of course, he made that mistake initially. I think it was lap 6. Locks up, goes straight on, ruins his race, unless obviously a safety car comes out, which it did. And then about 19 laps later, lap 25, just rides the curb too hard, unsettles the car. And very lucky, actually, watching this back, very lucky to not collect the leaders. But yes, it's going to be a 1 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, he did well in qualifying, which is a shame. I mean, it's too little too late, of course. But yeah, 2 out of 10 for Logie, because it's just shocking, really. Okay,
the fans gave Logan a 1. Alex Albon qualified 10th, started 10th, did not finish.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Alex Albon. His overtake was just gorgeous. It was lovely.
Really?
And of course, he was a complete passenger in the Sainz spin. And yeah, points could have been on the card for him, but alas, not.
Alas, not indeed. I've also gone for an 8 out of 10 for Alex. I think he was driving a fantastic race. He did the move of the season. And I feel like he's just braked and gone, oh, I have to go for this move or I'm going to rear-end the Alpine. So then, I'm not taking anything away from him, but I just love how that kind of then just became the most incredible double overtake in changeable conditions at the last chicane at Canada. That's not something I don't think anyone expected. But then, yeah, very unlucky to be wiped out by Sainz. I bet he wishes that Sainz had stopped just a little bit sooner, but he did not. And yeah, still deserves an 8 out of 10 because that was probably going to be points for the Williams. And the fans gave Alex an 8 out of 10 as well. Esteban Ocon qualified 18th, started 18th, and then finished 10th. You know what? I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. Ocon, good drive, very good drive. Kept it on the black stuff. He would have finished 9th, but he's a nice guy. Just want to remind everyone, he is a nice guy. He was chasing down Ricciardo for 8th. And I'm still considering this Alpine to be a dustbin. So I'm giving Ocon a very good grade. I think both of the drivers drove a pretty decent weekend. So yes, I am going to reward Ocon with a high grade. Congratulations.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 as well. To say Ocon started at the back, drove a very good race, and yeah, the P9 was definitely on. There's lots of talk about drivers and favouring certain drivers in teams and things. This one was not hidden at all, that they're now just kind of backing Pierre Gasly, because his chance to go for Ricciardo was never on. So I see why Ocon was annoyed, but then he's kind of like, he's put himself in that situation now where he's fallen out with the team, and he kind of not helped himself in that situation. So it was a good drive from Ocon, right from the back, to get points in a race where, in a crazy race as well.
Great effort, Ocon. Well done. The fans gave a 7. Pierre Gasly qualified 15th, started 15th, finished 9th.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Pierre Gasly as well. He was on the slicks actually quite early, which took a while for him, but impressive for him to essentially keep on the island, because a lot of other people didn't. And yeah, the fact that he managed to take that gamble when it was maybe a little bit too early, and it still paid off eventually, because it's quite easy to, it's too late, get back on the inters, and then your whole race is over because you've made another pit stop, and then you're going to go back to dries later. But stuck with it, did a very good job, got points, and yeah, he was like setting like fastest laps at some point throughout the race as well. So yeah, good drive from Gasly.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Gasly too. Both Alpines drove very, very well, despite there being incredible inter-team tension. And I'm sure Gasly is very happy that Ocon is a nice guy, even though I'm not sure how nice he would say, considering they were asking him to be let through many laps before so that he could fight Ricciardo. So I wonder how that one's going to unfold for the rest of the season. I'm very excited to see. And Gasly got a 7 from the fans. Lance Stroll qualified 9th, started 9th, finished 7th. You know what? Giving Lancey boy an 8 out of 10 as well. Nice drive, good weekend, kept it very quiet. We didn't see much of the Aston Martins, to be honest with you. They just sort of sat in that behind the front pack, but ahead of Formula B, which is kind of what we expected Aston Martin to be throughout this season. But they sort of fell into Formula B, but then they kind of came back this weekend with this crazy race. So yeah, I think Lance drove a solid race and some good points for the team.
8 out of 10 for Lance Stroll. If he did this more often than not every weekend, he wouldn't be such a meme and everyone bantering about how, he's daddy's boy and he's never going to get fired and stuff, because it's a very respectable job to finish behind Fernando Alonso on the road, your teammate in the same car, in very tricky conditions when there's very talented drivers as well who've also, made mistakes and gone off and things like that. So yeah, it's a good drive from Stroll.
The fans gave Lance a 7 out of 10. Fernando Alonso qualified 6th, started 6th, finished 6th.
I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Fernando Alonso.
My goodness.
It's one of those things where with Fernando, I'm always like, am I a fanboy? Yes.
Yes.
But also, in an Aston Martin, he has maximised the result. He was racing Lewis Hamilton for so much of that race. The Mercedes was very, very good. I don't believe for a second the Aston Martin is anywhere near as good as that Mercedes, yet he was in that pack, and this is the Fernando Alonso before the I hope it is a blip that he had those kind of 3 or 4 races where, must have to admit, some of the worst form of his career, really. He's had an absolute shocker, but this is back to the Fernando Alonso that just delivers the maximum what you can in an Aston Martin, and I feel like he's done that.
I'm going to have to go for a 9 as well. So yeah, you've convinced me there. I think he did extract everything he could out of that Aston Martin that does not belong to fight with the top 3 teams. So yeah, well done, Alonso. The fans didn't agree. 7 out of 10. Oscar Piastri qualified 4th, started 4th, finished 5th. It's going to be an 8 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri. Didn't quite have the pace of Norris at certain points, especially when Lando was clearing off into the distance. But I still think he had a very solid race, mixing it with the front, decent qualifying, And that's all you can really ask of Oscar. He just needs to, can he just be on the podium? Can he just have some luck or anything just to, I know he's won a sprint and whatnot, but I just feel like he always just slightly misses out on the podium and it's painful, but it was still a good drive.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Oscar. It was a very good drive. He is very impressive. He is such an impressive teammate to Lando. That driver pairing for me is so good. McLaren have got it nailed on with those two. I think they shared something that they've scored the most points between them, the most points from a team in the last 4 races has been McLaren, because they're normally together on the road and maximising. And dare I say, the shift of us talking about Ferrari can win the constructors, I still think they can. I know it was an awful weekend, especially with Perez's form, but I think McLaren have a chance as well if they keep doing this, and Oscar keeps delivering great results, and Lando as well. So yeah, good drive.
Let's go. The fans also gave Oscar Piastri an 8 out of 10. Lando Norris qualified 3rd, started 3rd, finished 2nd.
I have gone for a 9 out of 10 for Lando Norris. Good drive, very good drive, but with Lando's high standards, yes, he was unlucky with the safety car. Having watched it back, it's a big error from McLaren, because I saw some people doing the argument, maybe people on the broadcast that are maybe a little bit less scathing than the likes of Jack Villeneuve and things that are maybe sugarcoat it a bit more, and they're like, oh well, it's come out quite late, but Logan Sargent's in the wall the whole time. In your head you're surely going, there's going to be a safety car, let's get ready just in case. So yeah, not good for McLaren there, but Lando drove a good race, and he did make the odd mistake, fell back at the end, but still a very good drive from him.
I have also gone for a 9 out of 10 for Lando. Yeah, it all obviously came unravelling during that safety car moment. The only thing I can think of why McLaren didn't pit him was, are we going to get a red flag? Let's stay out for one more lap and just make sure that we don't pit and everyone else carries on, and then we get a red flag and then we lose position. But still, everyone else pit. So it was a blunder from McLaren. Perhaps they just got in a little bit of their own head there of trying to make the decision of, is there a red flag, or sort of thing. So there was an opportunity. Lando could have won that race. Alas, he didn't. But still, McLaren, every single weekend we go to, they are there. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for Lando, and the fans gave him a 9 as well. Carlos Sainz qualified 12th, started 12th, did not finish. I'm going to lock in 3 out of 10 for Carlos. A weekend to forget for both drivers, surprisingly, but bad qualifying, didn't really have the pace, and then spun on his own, and then wiped out Albon. So yes, it's going to be a 3 out of 10.
Yeah, I've also gone for a 3 out of 10 for Carlos. I think where the Ferraris qualified and the fact that they were very, very similar showed that I think you can kind of take a little bit for the fact that Ferrari weren't there this weekend. But then, didn't make it through the pack, was not able to really do anything, which they're stuck in a train, fair enough. But then to make a mistake when we've been praising, particularly, the likes of Carlos has been so consistent in the championships for the last few years. But yeah, big error to throw away potential points. Not a good weekend at all for him.
No, absolutely not. The fans also gave Carlos a 3 out of 10. Charles Leclerc qualified 11th, started 11th, did not finish. Let's get this one over and done with. So come on, chop.
I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc.
Perfect, great. 5 out of 10 too. Move on.
You say that though. What is there to say in terms of the Ferrari wasn't there? I think he got screwed over by the engine problem, and then even being on the wrong tyres, he was never going to be able to recover anything. So it's not like he's made a race-ending error like Carlos has, which is why he's obviously a lot lower in the 3s. But Charles, it's just one of those weekends to forget.
Yes, I've gone for a 5 out of 10 as well for Charles. Just hindered almost immediately by the engine issue. He was doing well to drive around the issue, but of course it all just went to pot. I don't even really blame Ferrari that much for trying the dry tyres. Like, what have you got to lose when you're a minute behind the pack? So yeah, it was a last roll of the dice, and then they just were like, oh, well, let's just bin it off and retire the car because he was lapped as well. So yeah, 5 out of 10 from me and a 5 from the fans as well. George Russell qualified first, started first, finished third. I am giving George an 8 out of 10. Now, some people might think, goodness gracious me, started on pole, he was fighting for the win, and he finished on the podium in a Mercedes. Matt, are you good? Yes, I am good, because that should have been a 10 out of 10, George Russell winning that race. Both Mercedes should have won that race, but they both fumbled the bag. And you might think, oh, well, he's not there every week. But this is Formula One. There was one opportunity, by the looks of things, at the moment for Mercedes to win a race. They were the quickest car in a lot of the conditions. George was leading the race at the start, cleared Max by 2.5 seconds and was looking comfortable. Then obviously when the tyres started to wear, that's when he was really starting to struggle. But into the dry again, he was doing great. But then he made that mistake, let Lando through. He then made another mistake passing Oscar. Too many mistakes. George could have won that race, hands down.
I've also gone for an 8 out of 10 for George Russell. I think it's too harsh to give any lower than an 8 because he has stuck it on pole and delivered when Hamilton really didn't in qualifying. But
well, don't get us started on that, mate.
Yeah, exactly. That's another theory, isn't it?
We're not being told. And Lewis is really stirring the conspiracy.
He is stirring
right now, isn't he?
He really is. But George, he's now been given a race-winning car and a very good chance to win. He's done a brilliant job in qualifying to put it on pole position. And it was just so many mistakes. And I know it's a difficult, tricky conditions and things, but when he was leading, it was kind of like, he can win this, definitely. You know, got the start out of the way, had a nice gap on Verstappen, but like you said, you know, Norris passed him and then he went off immediately, which loses a place to Verstappen. So he didn't even stay ahead of Verstappen there. Made another mistake at the corner and almost binned it exactly the same as he did last year. And then even when he had those medium tyres at the end and it was like, oh, he could do a Singapore where he's going to go at the end and on better tyres and catch people. Silly move on Oscar. I don't think it was a penalty, but I don't know why he turned in there thinking that Oscar was just going to disappear. He just needed to bide his time and overtake him in the next DRS zone. Yeah. It's almost like it's weird to give him an 8 and then there are so many negatives and we're sort of like calling him out on so many things, but it is true, like he's fumbled a win there, like 100%.
The fans gave George an 8 as well, so maybe we're all in the same boat and we don't need to explain ourselves, but we did anyway. Lewis Hamilton qualified 7th, started 7th, finished 4th.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton. This was a perfect case of showing that Hamilton is like, you know, the better racer, and that's where he's been much better in his career because he's finished right behind Russell when it didn't look like it was going to happen because he was stuck behind Alonso for so long. And you can say, you know, he got fortunate that he got caught back up again. He was on the wrong tyres at the end as well. What I do think is that, you know, you reverse Hamilton and Russell in the positions, and you can call me a Hamilton fanboy for saying this, but I think Hamilton would have at the very least been P2 and challenged Max more than Russell would have if he'd have been in first because he's a better racer. But it all came undone in qualifying, starting way down in 7th. He always had too much work to do.
I think it's a 7. I think it's a 7 out of 10 for Hamilton. It's very borderline 7 or 8. But he himself said after the race it was one of the worst drives he's done, making mistakes left, right and centre. And I'm sorry, if he says that, how can I give him an 8 out of 10 if he himself says it was one of the worst races he's done? He had a race-winning car under him. I don't know, I just didn't feel like Hamilton was really threatening at any point, despite seeing George there very much, you know, making mistakes, and we've said that, and that's why he got an 8. But he was right at the front. He got pole position. He was leading the charge at almost all times for Mercedes. So I can't give Hamilton the same grade. I really can't. It is close for sure, but I'm going to have to lock in a 7 for Hamilton. It's just a missed opportunity. I think he said, you know, they could have won, and he's finished 4th. So for a 7-time world champion, is that good enough? Probably not. The fans gave Lewis an 8 out of 10. Okay, let's go to Sergio Perez. qualified 16th, started 16th, didn't finish. It's a 0. Perez, it's a 0. I'm sorry, you got knocked out in Q1. Had contact with Gasly at the start, which I'm going to let him off. Very difficult conditions to see, a very light tap. But then just made no progress at all in a Red Bull that has won the race. He was stuck, just not making any moves whatsoever, and then just crashes. How can I give him any higher than a 0? I can't. I genuinely cannot even give him a 1. There's not one point in the weekend where you go, oh, Perez did quite well there. Or he did something. He didn't. And it's really sad to see. Perez has to bounce back in Spain. He has to. He cannot follow Monaco with this in a championship winning car. It's very sad to see, but it is a 0. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've gone for a 0 as well. How could it have gone any worse, particularly after, the new contract, a lot of pressure on him, everyone going, why have you signed him? He's been terrible. And then to have an even worse weekend than Monaco because, he's qualified incredibly poorly, way behind his teammate, then made absolutely no progress. And then, even if he'd made absolutely no progress and finished 12th or 13th, but then to have the embarrassment of spinning off, causing more damage to something we discussed in the main podcast about, he's going to cost Red Bull development with the budget, because if they're going to have to keep repairing car parts and repair his car, it's going to cost more than just him scoring no championship points. It's going to start costing that development race that Red Bull do not seem to be clear. So really, really, really bad weekend for Perez.
The fans gave Perez a 0. So we're all aligned with that one. Max Verstappen, qualified second, started second, finished first.
It's a 10 out of 10 for Max Verstappen. It was one of those drives where if you still think it's just the car, you will never be convinced, because a lot of people at the end of the race going, I can't believe Max has still won that after all that. And he reminds you of Michael Schumacher in that sense, that in that Schumi peak era, you could have these absolutely crazy races, loads of stuff going on, all drivers making mistakes, things going on, and Michael Schumacher would still win. And that's exactly what Max is doing at the moment. He doesn't give anyone a chance. And when his teammate is qualifying so far off, spinning into the wall, it isn't just the car. And it's just a champion's drive, basically. Really, really impressive.
It's a 10 out of 10 from me as well. Yeah, a champion's drive is exactly the way to describe it. He's inevitable. You know that he's going to be there. Even when Lando's clearing away, you know that one safety car is going to bring him potentially back into play. And it did. And as soon as he got into the lead, he was able to extend the lead out of a car that we weren't convinced was going to be quicker than the McLarens. And obviously we've spoken about the Mercedes and how they sort of slightly fumbled the bag. But Max is there. Max will be there when his car dominates, but Max will also be there when his car isn't dominating. So it's a lethal combination where he will just always be there trying to win. And an amazing weekend for Max, and extends his championship lead by a gargantuan margin. So there you go. And the fans also gave Max a 10. So who is our P1? I wonder. It's Max Verstappen for me, because Max is the only one I gave a 10 out of 10. There was a close one, I think, for Lando. It could have argued, but no, Max, 10 for me.
Yeah, 10 for Max. Has to be Max. It's weird. We did this when we had that biggest winner in the main podcast, and you're kind of looking through, going, who's the biggest winner there? It is crazy, isn't it? In a race that had so much chaos, mixed conditions. That's normally one where you get like a crazy drive from someone that really, delivers. There's so many potential drivers that could have got a 10 themselves if they'd have driven the perfect race, but they didn't. And Max Verstappen just delivered again. So Max Verstappen, P1.
Yay! And there we go. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening to this F1 driver ratings for the Canadian Grand Prix. Of course, we've got a week off before we go to Spain, which always is an absolute worldie of a race. So looking forward to that one. And Tommy, what are your final thoughts?
final thoughts are, if Spain manages to be good, what a season we're actually having.
Yes.
No, I'd be very surprised, but I'm still looking forward to it nonetheless. Surprisingly good season it's been so far. Pleasantly surprised indeed.
In the meantime, we're going to Le Mans, which is very exciting this weekend, aren't we? So hopefully the rain holds off, but it looks like it will be very good weather. So cross your fingers for us, and we will see you very soon for another video. Lots of love. See you soon, and podcast as well. Goodbye.
Bye.